believe that the last best check to ensure the accuracy of our elections is and will continue to be post-election audits. And the Department of State has had a post-election audit working group that I have to note does not include anyone from the General Assembly. There are various special interests, Brennan Center, Common Cause, Verified Voting, folks who are on this group. But what is the status of the group's work, and what's your timeline for sharing information with the General Assembly? And, you know, I think it's important for us to know if you're going to anticipate any recommendations for legislative changes to come our way.
Thank you, Senator. And actually, it's an incredibly timely question. We just sent out a notification to the counties that we're going to be doing our first statewide pilot in August. So because for the presidential primary from June 2nd. So we're going to be doing a test run of what Mercer County, and Jeff can talk about Mercer County's pilot last year, and Philly did a pilot last year. Because of COVID-19, as you can imagine, the work group's activities were very curtailed in the spring. So we didn't have any follow-ups. Obviously, adding circumstances of putting people in close quarters and so forth was not something that we could add in the spring. But now that it's August, we are going to do this statewide pilot. And I think that will help identify some of the practices that may be useful in pushing for legislative change. So I think, as you know, the timeline for the work group was that we put out our first annual report at the end of December. That's on our website. That talks through kind of generally the practices that the work group, and Jeff was also on the work group, so he could talk about that some as well. There were 6 counties that were part of that work group, in addition to the Department of State and the subject matter experts. Sorry, I seem to be losing my voice. So some of the things that I think we wanted to figure out in pilots, the pilots are happening this year and next year, and the assumption would be that would help us work with you to figure out what those legislative changes would be useful. So for example, it may be replacing the 2% statutory audit that's currently in the statutes with something, a more advanced post-election audit type, such as the risk limiting audit, that's not the only type. So did that answer your question? There may be other things that are identified as well as we go through this pilot and in future pilots, but we are going to be doing this pilot in early to mid-August.
And I appreciate that.
Going to, you have to provide us an audit from this past primary election soon. I think that's what she was asking.
The 2% statutory audits do already happen. I mean, those are statutory, and the counties can talk about those. But this is the work group that's looking into other more state-of-the-art ways of doing auditing that we think are important, that are mathematically demonstrated to prove, to a reasonable degree of statistical certainty that the outcome of an election is accurate. So for example, risk limiting audits are one type that are being used in many states or several states across the country, and are seen as kind of the next generation of accuracy, again, confirming that the outcome of an election is accurate. So this pilot is just a pilot. It's to try a new type of audit in addition to the statutory 2% audits that currently are mandated by Pennsylvania law. Does that answer your question?
Madam Secretary, I appreciate it. It does. And I would just say 2 things. One, if you find that there are changes that are going to be made, we're working in constrained timelines. And the other thing is that in the future, to have representation from the General Assembly on these audit teams, because oftentimes those recommendations come back to us. It would be good to have someone from the General Assembly sit in, and perhaps a bit more balanced makeup to those teams would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your time today.